First up is Kirsty Emery, a knitwear designer based in London and co-founder of Unmade. Now she's going to talk about how Unmade is changing the industry around to make mass customization a sustainable reality. Kirsty.
Hi, thank you very much, Siobhan. So, as Siobhan said, I'm from Unmade. I'm a knitwear designer by background, and I'm a co-founder at Unmade, and my role there is the Fashion and Manufacturing Director. So, let's just see. Here we are. So, customer design has changed. It's evolving all of the time as people want uniqueness and variety and are constantly wanting something that's different and personal and special to them. We can see that this is already happening where you get brands such as Nike who've sold over $500 million worth of customized product last year, and that's one of their fastest growing areas. It started out as your Nike ID shoes that we all know about, and it's broadened out across the entire of their range. But how has the supply chain been responding to this? At the moment, the fashion model is broken because the supply chain isn't changing fast enough to deal with this. The supply chain is built on a predictive model where we make decisions earlier in the season based on past sales and things that we know are coming up to produce a certain quantity of garments. This ends up with about 10% of all garments made going direct to landfill. And by direct to landfill, I mean that they're never bought by anyone. They just go direct to landfill. This is a huge quantity of money based on the fact that this is a $1.4 trillion business, the fashion industry. So that's $100 billion of garments, which are just going straight into landfill, which is terrifying. So some brands have tried to do things about this so that they're reducing their waste, such as Zara. Oh, sorry, it's changed from a keynote to a PowerPoint, so there's a few little bugs along the way on my presentation. So they reduced their production timelines down from 2 months to just 2 weeks, which means that they can be much more reactive and they can purely work on what's actually selling through, which is actually much better environmentally because there's less waste. But how do we make this more responsive so that things are actually being sold once something's bought and it's really linking up and getting that last 2 weeks down to make something which is really works much better? We can see it in other industries, such as the automotive industry, where software and production are much more closely linked. For example, in BMW, you can make a car in 20 hours, and that's from it literally being purchased to getting it off the end of the production line, which is amazing. 3D printing has helped a lot in this and has been transforming these areas with aerospace and medical prototyping, but it's not quite happened in the fashion industry. But we feel that Unmade, we've been building a solution which can help with this and start to bring all of these technologies into the fashion industry and bring the fashion industry into the future. So just to take you through what we do at Unmade, we give people the power to tailor their products to each and every customer by building an interface which sits into a brand website. There's an iframe here, and it's styled so you don't feel like you ever leave the website. When the customer places the order, it goes direct to the factory, onto the knitting machine, and ready to be produced and then sent directly to the customer. So that means that we touch on everything from when the customer's making the purchase right through to the logistics of sending it to the customer after it's been made. So the thing that's made the big difference here is the current supply chain starts with design, and you design your garment. Then you make it in your production, which is where we get the overproduction, and then we persuade customers that that's what they want to buy. This is what creates all of the overproduction. But at Unmade, by reducing these, at Unmade, by changing this so that something isn't actually made and it's not going to production until it's been bought, you're selling it before you're making it, which is a huge amount of advantages for both the environment and also for brands. So for the environment, there is no excess production, so there isn't any excess garments going into landfill, but there's also, for the brand, that means that they have much more positive working capital because they don't have money tied up in garments that they have no idea whether they're going to sell or not. And particularly when you look at things like environmental changes that we have around us. It's playing havoc with all of the winter sales, for example. So historically, we used to know as an industry that you'd be selling a lot of coats or a lot of heavy knitwear from, say, October onwards. This October's been really warm. I've still been wearing t-shirts to work. It's ruining everything, and it's only adding to what's going straight directly to waste. So, how did we come up with this idea? So we started in 2013. We were working with UK Sport, Hal, Ben and myself. Hang on, there we are. But we have a very mixed range of backgrounds. I am a knitwear designer by background, as Siobhan mentioned, whereas Hal is a mechanical engineer and Ben is an electrical engineer. And it's this bringing together of different ideas and cross-pollination which gave us the opportunity to start really questioning why things worked in a certain way. The project we were doing with UK Sport was looking at making custom garments for Olympians. And we came very quickly to the realization that we couldn't afford to make the custom garments for the Olympians. And if you know the budget that goes behind an Olympian's outfit to go out and compete for their country, that is quite a big budget that you're playing with. And Hal and Ben come from a background where they're used to working with wood or metal or 3D printing, where they have tools like Rhino or these other CAD systems where they can design stuff and they can send it to a fabricator and get it turned around in a few days or a week very easily. Whereas I come from the knitwear industry where that's not possible. Learning how to program for knit machines is incredibly complicated, and it's also a very guarded treasure. So just so you understand what knitting factories look like, because I am aware that a lot of people think they look like this. This is not what they look like, very sadly. It's a thing that I regularly have conversations with people. This is an industrial knitting machine. They weigh about 1.2 tons or more. They have 600 or more needles on them. And I've done a little calculation, and they work at roughly the speed of 150 granny power. So they're considerably faster. So these are the machines that we work with. And when I first started introducing Hal and Ben to this concept of knitting, they just couldn't understand how there was these incredible machines, which are essentially like a 3D printer in the concept that you take raw material in and you have a fully shaped and structured garment out. And they can make different things, one thing straight after the other, straight after the other. You can make scarf, jumper, cardigan, everything different. But they're not utilized in that way because the programming is too expensive. So we felt that this was definitely something we needed to tackle. And the very kind people at Innovate UK agreed with us and gave us a grant. So, whoops. In 2014, we worked our little socks off doing various projects and trying to do research in the background. Before at the end of 2014, we were able to launch our first store and test website, which was a proof of concept which we built within Somerset House, which is where we're based in the centre of London, where it was just a really good chance that we could actually invite people to come and see and understand what we were talking about. Because up until that point, we were three relatively fresh-faced kids being like, we've got this great idea. Don't worry, guys. We can reprogram your knitting machines, and then we can do this. Your customers can go straight onto your website. They can place an order. It'll go straight to your factory. It'll be brilliant. And they just went, sure it will. Who are you? Have you got any proof of this? So this was our very first proof of concept, where we were able to actually invite people in, or they could do it online from home, and then they could come and watch things being produced directly on the machine, which was really interesting based on the number of people who wandered in, had no idea what it was, and we had so many questions. My personal favorite, though, was, is it an ice cream maker? It's not. Then in 2015, we went through Techstars, which is a tech incubator, which gave us the opportunity to raise our first round of funding, which allowed us to up our physical retail and e-commerce game. So we were able to relaunch a much more robust site, and also launch our first proper pop-up store in Covent Garden, as well as moving into Selfridges on Oxford Street to sell directly to customers there and do some great A/B testing on what actually worked and what customers were interested in, what they did like, what's too much choice as well, because that's a really important thing. There is a reason why we all do different things, and actually we have so many choices in our lives. We don't want more choices all the time. We want freedom to feel like we've made a choice, but we don't want to give ourselves more work to do. We also developed our on-demand manufacture. So this means the actual background of what we do. What people see as the foreground of the websites that we build and the iframes that we build into other people's websites is just the beginning. What's actually going on under the hood is much, much more complicated. So when you look at knitwear, there is a lot of different things going on, starting with how we're going to get those orders through to the factories. Every factory is different. Every knitted garment that you make, depending on which factory you're working with and what their water quality is like, which machines they're using, how old their machines are using, which batch of yarn, is all different. So we had to build an automated manufacturing system which could not only take the order from the website, but then send it to the factory. The factory can log in and then download the paperwork that they need for their very highly skilled workers to take it around the factory, but also the zip file to load it directly onto the knitting machine. We also have our visualization, which is what you see on when you're on the website and you're looking at the actual garment. So we only actually make one garment, which is this very fetching green and orange number. And this essentially works like a green screen. So and we can put this into any situation. We can put this into e-com, or we can also do some lifestyle shots with it. It depends on what we're working on at the time. But we can build off that any visualization of the garment that we want. And every visualization is exactly correct down to the knit stitch, because we can place every knit stitch from the base garment. So you'll never see something that you can't actually buy, because that's just really upsetting, particularly when you're doing cross-size things. As part of that, we also include stitch rendering. So when you're looking at these garments and you're being able to see all of the different patterns that we place on them, you can see every single stitch if you zoom in. This means that we know that every stitch is accounted for, and once again, you're not going to be buying something that isn't the reality of what you see. The reason that this is really important is that when you're working across sizes, obviously, if you're working on an extra small jumper, for example, it's going to be this wide, and you have an awful lot less stitches than if you have an extra large or whatever size garment, which might have be this wide at the same point. So you'll have, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40 extra stitches that you have to account for. Normally in production, what happens is that designers either add in more pattern so that you can keep going across and you don't notice the difference, or they will just add more space around if it's like a logo on the front of a garment. They might scale the logo, but they might not. Anyway, this isn't something we need to worry about. Then we have our physics engine. So Unmade is made up of quite a wide range of skills, because we have a lot of problems in the background, such as tension to solve. So when you're knitting something, for example, this lovely jacquard garment, your yarn is being knitted across two knit beds, and every time that it swaps, so you swap from a yellow to a blue or a blue back to a yellow, it has to cross the two knit beds, which means that it gets a little bit longer and you have a little bit more yarn in the system, which means that when a jumper comes out, it gets a little bit bigger each time. So if you have a pattern that's really high density, such as this patternation down the middle of the jumper, that bit will start to become really baggy, which is really unattractive, and you end up with a loop or a dip in the bottom of your garment. So we needed to create this physics engine to tighten these stitches to the right amount, which is all done automatically. So for every single stitch, we have hundreds of calculations going on in the background, working out exactly how much we need to tighten it by, so that when you get your actual garment out, it sits straight. So you have your custom design on the right, the body panel of what it looks like in the center, and then on the left, you have the tension value map. So the red is the really tight bits. Now, the thing that you might notice is that the stitches you'll have sort of one-off stitches, and we can't do one-off tensions in the tension map. So we also have to take into consideration the actual mechanical, what's the word I'm looking for? Mechanical limitations of the machine. So is also building that into everything that we build, because we don't actually change any of the hardware. We want to use the existing hardware because these are machines that are already used all over the world. And then we also have to look at how we're going to practically track these garments around the factory. Because every single one is different, it can't work like a normal factory where you make, I don't know, 20 fronts and then 20 sleeves and then 20 backs and 20 more sleeves, 2 lots of sleeves. Got to keep the maths right. You can't just throw all of that into a big bundle and then send it around the factory, because you need to make sure that your left and your right sleeve are kept together, and you need to make sure that your left and your right sleeve go the right way round onto the garment as well, because someone's going to be really upset if they've got their front and back round the wrong way, or their sleeves. So we've also had to work out how we're going to integrate into the factories and how to track the products around the factories. So this is just a quick example of what we did in 2016. We did a collaboration with Opening Ceremony. So you can see here we developed a design where you could change colors, you can cycle through different patterns, you can change the trims, and this is one of the lifestyle shots that they had. We launched it on Farfetch, which was really exciting for us because it was then not only our first international brand that we worked with, but it was also the first time that we worked and put our iframe into another brand's e-commerce platform. So in case anyone doesn't know who Farfetch are, they're the global leading online luxury sales platform. So they're like Net-a-Porter, but bigger. So that was a big change. And we also, in the same project, integrated fully into our first external factory. So we worked with Johnsons of Elgin, who I don't know if you've ever heard of them or not, but they're based up in Hawick, in the Scottish borders, and they have an incredible history of 200 years of working with some of the finest luxury fashion houses and specializing in cashmere. So this was a really important year for us as our first big launches. So 2017, unfortunately, we've been doing some really exciting things, but I'm not allowed to tell you about any of them. But we are now working with some multi-billion-pound brands, bringing this as a reality and integrating into their websites. So you will be seeing some more exciting customization moving into these new spaces in the coming months. Whilst all of this work has been within knitwear, we're also developing I have no idea where they're coming from either. We're also developing into print and embroidery so that we're not just limited to this one system. This is a key part of everything that we've built at Unmade, is that it's a production system that is more than just knitting. It's a new way of creating garments. And, oh, that's an exciting change through. So we've started off with providing customization in knitwear. We're building integrations into other manufacturing methods. That's where we are at the moment, at the end of the blue chunk. We're achieving scale with custom product as customers are willing to pay more. This is something that we're starting to see as brands are looking at how much customers are willing to pay for things. Interestingly enough, people are much more willing to spend more for customization, but once customization is up and running in a brand, it's actually cheaper for them because they no longer have to include sell-through. So they're actually saving money, but you'll probably pay more. And And then with scale, the price comes back down so that it becomes normal and volume can actually start to be produced this way. And we can start moving into looking more at on-demand production and restocking. So that long term, the entire supply chain can be on demand and overproduction will no longer be. So thank you very much. I think I've just squeezed it in.